Hello, we're here today with Seth McMillan, the Republican nominee for the 48th District Illinois Senate seat in the November 6th general election. We appreciate you coming here to talk with us about the issues facing the district and invite you to start by providing an opening statement about why you're running and why you feel you're the best candidate in this race.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity, and I'm glad to be here. And so I'm Seth McMillan. I'm the nominee, and I am a small business owner. I've owned a business for about 13 years. I've been a past board member of the Taylorville School Board, and I currently sit on a township board of trustees. So I have a little bit of experience in local government. I'm also the chairman of the Republican Party in Christian County. I got involved in politics maybe 4 to 6 years ago on the local level. I wanted to get involved and try to help my community become better, and that's one of the reasons I ran for the Taylorville School Board. So I feel like my background as a business owner, as a community member in Taylorville who has, I've always supported my community in local endeavors as far as community events and organizations. As well as in my elected offices that I've held. I believe those experiences are what's needed in Springfield and in a legislator. I'm also married. I have 2 small children that are 2 and 4. And my wife and I are very involved in our community. We're involved in agriculture. My wife is a Farm Bureau manager in Christian County. So that is something that's very close to both of us. Both of our families are involved in farming, and of course I'm in the landscaping and lawn care business, which is part of the agriculture industry as a whole. So again, I appreciate your time and look forward to answering your questions.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to jump right into the campaign and one of your more recent campaign ads, which features a cockroach, where you call career politicians cockroaches. I guess talk us into what made you want to do this type of ad.
Well, I mean, I think that goes back to the reason why I got involved in politics to begin with. I think that people in Illinois, specifically my district, need to come to the realization that people that make a career out of politics is one of the biggest problems we have in Illinois. And I don't care what side of the aisle they're on. I feel like we need to have term limits on all politicians, not just leadership, and that our founding of the nation was built on the fact that we would have citizen legislators that would go and do things that were good for people and good for their communities and then go back to their day jobs. I'm not looking to make a career out of this. I already have a career. And so that's where that ad came from, just that conviction that I have.
Can you walk us through what types of term limits you support? Is this for all legislators, legislative leaders? Do you have specifics in mind?
Well, I support term limits on all legislative leaders. I'm not talking about local county board and local offices. I'm talking about state legislative offices, governor, and on up into the federal level. I believe that someone serving 8 to 10 years is kind of the range that I throw out there, and I believe that is a fair amount of time, and that we should give people the option of being willing to serve and serve for the right reasons, and that means changing people out periodically and trying to get new thinkers and new ideas brought to the table.
And when it comes to legislative leaders, would you include leadership time in that 8 to 10, or are you talking 8 to 10 as a rank and file and then the opportunity to be in leadership?
I mean, I think that could be a discussion. I think that 8 to 10 is, for rank and file members, is fair.
I'm going to play devil's advocate with you here for a second and argue that a career politician have a better understanding of how things work, and they might not be as swayed as easily as a interest group might that has a specific purpose, which is to represent one specific interest, not the state as a whole. So what's wrong with someone who has served as long, as a career politician, as you put it, beyond that 8 to 10 years?
Well, I kind of disagree with that a little bit. I believe that entrenched special interests and politicians, I think that the longer they're in office, the more entrenched they become, and they lose sight of the reason why they're there.
And you said this would apply to both sides of the aisle, so because this chamber you're looking to join the state senate, the GOP leader there has been there for more than 2 decades.
Yep,
as
you're
well.
correct.
So he is someone you think should conceivably, would a step down, not run, or?
Well, I'm not going to tell somebody what they should or shouldn't do.
Yeah.
We don't have term limits, and it's not even a. It's something that frankly the voters should be able to decide on. I think that. Everybody that's in office can make their own decision on if they've been there long enough or not. Until the people have the opportunity to say no, 10 years and you're done.
There's been a lot of talk lately about civility in politics and the tone of some of the rhetoric that gets thrown out. The word cockroach. Why did you choose that word?
Well, I think
we're talking about people you may disagree with, but
yeah.
Call people cockroaches.
Well, I think that's an allegory for just an overall the way that society feels about people that are not doing what's best for their local constituents. This whole idea that politics has just recently become divisive. If we look back at history, some of the things that were written and said about Abraham Lincoln were far worse than what we have in today's climate.
You've also you have ads that speak critically of politicians from the Chicago area. Is there a reason you're focusing on that specific region?
Yeah, because I believe that Chicago has taken a much larger chunk of what we deserve downstate, and examples of that can be found in many of the budgets that have been passed for the last couple of decades that seem to spend more money in that city while our infrastructure is decayed and while our schools have fallen behind in downstate Illinois, and people agree with that message. It's a message that resonates with voters, and people know that that's true. Just recently, my opponent voted for a budget that sent hundreds of millions of dollars to bail out the RTA in Chicago for bonds that they owed money on. We have local contractors, laborers in this area that are upset with the fact that they didn't have road work to bid on. Well, they had road work to bid on, but not in the amount that we should have had in this area.
But I believe there was a study recently from the Paul Simon Institute, which is pretty nonpartisan, independent, that came to the exact opposite conclusion. Questioned this whole narrative that Chicago's benefiting from the rest of the state.
Well, that's new to me.
It's been out.
Okay, well, it's new to me.
As what I guess I know, if you were elected to the Senate, it's likely it would remain in the hands of Democrats. So how would having this bias toward another region of the state where a large number of other politicians reside help you succeed in getting legislation approved that would help your constituents here in central Illinois? Well,
I'm going to represent my constituents in their best interests. I'm not going to settle for the crumbs that come out of a piece of legislation or a budget that doesn't give us our fair share. And I'm willing to work with others to get that done, but there has to be our downstate communities are dying, and we need people that will stand up for us.
Moving on to some of the issues you might face if elected. Will argue the biggest one is the unfunded pension liability. And how would you, as a member of the Senate, propose the state address the unfunded liability, which is at least $130
Well, I would prioritize spending, first of all. I mean, we've had career politicians for decades that have pushed pension payments off, which was wrong. So spending needs to be prioritized. We need to balance budget. We need a budget that will give certainty to our employers and to our vendors in this state. And we need to make sure that going forward, we take care of our employees. As an employer, the first priority I have is to take care of my employees. And if I don't do that, it's hard to operate a business. And I feel like the state of Illinois has not taken care of their employees like they should have. Instead, they have expanded other programs and gone into other areas that really should have been lower on the totem pole. They should have taken care of their employees first.
Okay. You talk about making pension payments in a timely manner, which is something this editorial board certainly has endorsed, but that just keeps us from not getting in any
Sure.
deeper. How do you deal with the backlog? Where do we find the
Well,
money
I think
for
this
that?
all comes back to the big elephant in the room, which is growing our economy and getting more people working and more people paying taxes. This is. I feel like this has been talked about forever. The last couple election cycles is everybody knows that Illinois is bottom in the nation in economic growth. We're losing people. Personally, in my business, I've lost several clients that have moved to other states for tax benefits. And those are, how many times is that happening across our state where people are leaving and they're now paying taxes somewhere else? And so we need to improve our economy. We need to grow Illinois so that we can have the ability to pay down these unfunded liabilities, and that's the way we do that.
We'll probably get back to economic development, but on pensions, you mentioned taking care of employees. Moving forward, how do you address state workers in the future? What would you recommend changes to how?
Well, I think one of the things I liked about the budget that was passed recently was that it gave employees the opportunity to go on their own and some type of an IRA, not forced, but it gave them the opportunity to do so. I think there are a lot of employees that might like to manage their own retirement. I think that's an opportunity, but I don't believe it's something that should be forced on employees. And that's my position. I don't believe in taking away something that was promised from an employee.
So you would you be in favor of changing the Constitution's clause where you cannot diminish benefits that were already earned?
I don't think that's a Pandora's box that we want to open. I really don't.
Similar with pensions, and since you served on a school board, I'd be interested in your perspective on this. There's been a push lately to move pensions for teachers from the state to the local district. Would you be supportive of that?
Not if it was going to, not unless there was a way to fund it. We have, in our case, our district is under PTEL, so that they don't have the ability to raise property taxes. Other districts, could come up with that additional revenue if they had to absorb that cost. But I think that the state of Illinois promised to make those payments on behalf of school districts, and I would need to see some kind of a plan on how that would be switched over. I know Speaker Madigan has pushed that for quite a while now, but it would definitely have to be something that would be phased in over time. And I don't think that there's enough additional funding in the new funding reform formula to be able to accomplish those payments. It'd be, last I knew, it was somewhere around $1 million that would add to the Taylorville School District's cost annually for those payments.
To shift the pensions if they do that.
Yeah.
To do it all, or to do?
To do it all at one time. That's how much it would be. So, so there would have to be a plan, and I would have to see how that would be proposed.
we want to go back to the economy. You mentioned about the need to create more jobs. What do you see that the state could do to encourage that type of job growth?
Well, I think a couple things. I think we do need a property tax freeze, and we need to continue to try to lower cost of insurance for employers and workers' compensation, tort reform. I have friends who live in other states, surrounding states, that have the same type of business I do. They pay about 25 to 30% less in insurance premiums. That's a big deal for especially companies that are competing directly with businesses that are across state lines. So those are the things that I think we need to work on, and those should be things that both sides could come to an agreement where we could find some common ground in how we can reduce those costs to businesses and spur some economic growth. I also believe that possibly expansion of some enterprise zones, especially in downstate Illinois, could help with that.
And as a business owner with the workers' comp and insurance, are there specific things you see that need to be changed, that explain why you're having to pay so much more than counterparts elsewhere?
Well, I think in workers' compensation, for example, it's the inability of someone to investigate fraud in Illinois, to put it simply. It's much easier to investigate and prosecute someone for insurance fraud of workers' comp in Missouri, for example. I have a friend who works in that industry, and there's a lot of we could get in the weeds on that issue, but sure. I think there are areas that and we're not talking about taking away anything that somebody deserves if they get hurt on a job. We're talking about being fair to both employers and employees.
The state's finances in general are in rough shape. We talked about pensions a little bit, but in general, the finances are bad, have been for some time. How would you work to change the financial trajectory of the state to get us on firmer fiscal standing?
Well, I think it's what I talked about before. It's about growing the economy. We cannot get ourselves out of a hole without growing the economy and creating jobs, encouraging employers to build and expand here.
How would you rate the job the governor's done in his first term? We've actually lost, I think, the latest figures, more than 100,000 jobs.
Yeah. On a are you talking about a A, B, C, D type of grade? Yeah, I mean, I'm not thrilled with the job that the governor has done, but I also feel like he's had a lot of pushback. He was elected on a mandate from the people of Illinois, and I feel that that Speaker Madigan and others have obstructed the mandate and the will of the people. We wanted. Bruce Rauner was elected on a mandate to change the way business operates in Illinois. I don't agree with every aspect of his turnaround agenda that he was pushing for so many years, but we needed to have a chance for some of those things to at least be discussed and talked about and voted on in the General Assembly.
I don't think the Senate board would disagree with your assertion that we need economic growth in this area to do that, but would there also be areas you would look to cut in state spending? Because one of the problems we've had in the state is the legislature spends more than revenue it takes in, and if that continues this year's budget is about $1 billion out of whack, the last figure I heard. How would you work to ensure we're not spending more than we're receiving?
Well, I think there's the budget has areas that need to be, and I don't want to give the typical canned answer of line by line, budgeting, but we need to look at things like the inefficiency at CMS, for example. I talked to the rank and file guys that work at the IDOT garages in our district, and they talk about how how messed up the system is. Just to buy some tools and supplies for their garage, they have to go through so many hoops, and there just seems to me that there's a lot of waste and inefficiency in government. And I know that's an answer that everybody wants to give, but it's true on so many levels, and that's where we need to look. And again, we will get to a balanced budget if we can create some jobs, stop people from leaving the state of Illinois. You know, I've heard that we've lost so many people that possibly by the next census we could lose at least 1, maybe 2 congressional seats. That's a lot of taxpayers, and I would bet that most of those people that left were good tax-paying citizens who had good careers, and they were going to find a better opportunity. So, to me, that is everything. All of your questions come back to that economic growth component that we need to find.
There's been talk from some about trying to roll back the income tax increase that was instituted a few years ago. Where do you come down on that issue?
I'd like to roll it back.
Then if we do, how would you make up the money? Because, you know, even
Well,
the governor's budget.
It depends on how
included
quick.
those
It depends on how quickly it would be rolled back. I think the biggest thing with the budget is that we need certainty in that budget. So everybody from me as a small business owner to school districts and local municipalities, we need to have a certainty of what we are going to be working with. And we can't raise them again. That's one of the biggest things that I hear going door to door, is that people cannot afford a tax hike. And my opponent campaigned on not raising taxes in 2012. Went back on that promise. I don't agree with the progressive income tax because I don't believe it's fair with. I don't believe that that's a tax that's going to be fair to farmers, business owners in my district. So, again, to me, it comes back to how long is it going to take to phase that out, and giving people certainty of what the state budget is going to look like.
You said you would like a capital bill, according to your campaign website. What would you like to see done?
Well, I'd like to see resurfacing of roads and bridges fixed and repaired. I think I work in Decatur, and parts of. I mean, obviously, I've been traveling this district for a long time, and our roads are in terrible condition. And that is the main thing that I would like to see done. I would like to see our existing infrastructure improved first before there's any other new projects. There are several examples, even in my district, of 4-lane highways that have not been completed yet. We've got Route 51 going south out of Pana, for example. Things like that could be, something done in the future. But right now, I believe we need to have our existing roads and bridges updated, and that's how I would do it. I do not agree with. Probably one of your questions coming up is I don't agree with a tax on mileage. That to me, in a rural district, all the vehicles that I own in my business, we drive thousands of miles to get from point A to point B. Constituents in my district drive to Springfield to go to work. They drive to Decatur to go to work every day. I think that would be a disastrous hit to people that are already strapped for cash and are already trying to keep themselves afloat in their family budgets.
How would you pay for it? I mean, as we've talked, the state is struggling with money, even if the economy improved, that to use it to balance budgets and to pay for pensions and do all this. I mean, the money has to come from somewhere. So where would we get this money from?
Well, I think the first step to this was a couple years ago when we had the lockbox voted in to make sure that those funds weren't swept and used for something else. And I think that there needs to be a prioritization of which projects need the most attention in our state. And we need to, the first step is getting to where we have a balanced budget, where we have a path that is clear for people to see that we're going to have a balanced budget, and we know the direction we're going. And so for me, an infrastructure bill, may not be something that's immediate, but what is immediate is that we need to prioritize those projects. We need to make sure those road funds are being spent fairly across the entire state, not being used to pay off bonds for the Regional Transit Authority in Chicago.
Your website also noted you want fair school funding. There has been reform that has been instituted. So what would you like to see done differently?
Well, what I was disappointed with is that, when I was on the Taylorville School Board, I supported a change in the funding formula. I think that, for example, giving a permanent block grant to Chicago Public Schools was not fair to the rest of downstate. We still are not getting our categorical payments on time in many districts. But the big thing that I was disappointed, I think there was an opportunity, there should have been an opportunity to reduce some of the unfunded mandates on school districts that was not taken. And as somebody that was a school board member for 8 years, we heard about the disastrous rollout of the park test, for example, that the State Board of Education messed up. Common Core standards, the things that bog down, that keep teachers and administrators from doing what they need to do, which is educate kids. And so mandate relief would have been something that could that could maybe not make a huge impact on budgets, but it would make an impact on local district budgets. So, in school funding reform, I've been accused of not supporting it, which is a total lie. I voted on a resolution when I was on the school board to change the funding formula. I did not agree with a bailout of Chicago teacher pensions or a permanent block grant for the city of Chicago. And we've been in trouble for a long time in school funding. We've had, during my 8 years on the Taylorville School Board, we lost $4 million over a 5-year period that started under Governor Quinn in the form of prorated general state aid payments. And I hold my opponent partly accountable for that. He was involved in the budget process, Chief of Staff to John Cullerton. And so, to me, it's been a very, it's been unfair, the coverage and credit that someone gets when they were the one that to use an analogy, if somebody lights your house on fire and they run over with a garden hose to try to put it out, what are we going to do? Are we going to thank them for trying to put the fire out with a garden hose? Because that's what I feel like what happened, especially in our district, when we lost that amount of money over a 5-year period, and then now we have a couple $100,000 coming in on a new funding formula. We had to make some very tough decisions in Taylorville because of that, and I just think that funding reform bill gave way too much to Chicago, and we're still kind of catching the scraps in downstate school districts.
You'd mentioned park and Common Core. Are there any other specific mandates you'd like to see rolled back from school districts? Well,
I think anything that can keep a teacher from having to teach to a test. My philosophy in education is that we ought to be teaching kids how to be creative and how to have fun and learn. And I think that a lot of these mandates, the surveys that come out from the State Board of Education, that cause our educators to have to spend time teaching to a test and not educating and not being not having that atmosphere of creativity. I think that's what we're really losing in school districts. And so those would be my main two areas that I could think about. I mean, you could talk about PE, driver's ed. There's changes that could be made there that might give some relief to some school districts, maybe not all, but that, you know, a requirement to, you know, requirements that basically cause educators to have to teach to a test, and there's no wonder why we have so many kids that are uninterested in going to school.
I'm just going to quickly ask, because it's been in the headlines, there's been a push to have a minimum salary for teachers. Here at the state, the governor recently vetoed it. It would set the minimum salary at $40,000. Would you be in support of that?
Well, the salary, I believe, started out at 32, and it would be phased in over
years.
time. I think that to me, this is a local control issue, and that salary also, by the way, included whatever the pension contribution would be from a school district. So, in my case, if I can go back to the Taylorville School District again, I helped to. I was on the negotiating committee for 3 different times, and we don't have a teacher making less than that amount of money. We had good contract negotiations, and the salary schedule is set and negotiated between the union and the school board. And I feel like, you know, do we need a minimum salary? Probably, but I believe that most teachers are probably getting above that point anyway, or at least they should be. So I think that is best left to local boards and local union reps to decide what their salary schedule should be.
Well, we appreciate you coming here to spend some time with us today, and we invite you to give your closing statement, your elevator pitch, as it were, as to why you should be the victor for on election night for the 48th Senate.
Well, again, thank you for the time. This is my first time doing anything like this. I'm not a career politician. I've mostly worked in the background of other people's campaigns, and but I felt strongly that somebody needed to run. If anything, we have competition and people have choices in their elections. I believe strongly in term limits, and I believe that we need to get Illinois on a better fiscal path, and that's what I will work on every day if I'm elected. I don't intend to become a career politician. Sometimes that may get me into trouble because I may say things that that people may take in a different way. But I'm the type of person that says what I feel, right or wrong. So people will know where I stand on issues, and I again appreciate the time and you know, look forward to continuing the campaign.